Good evening. I grew up in Grand Prairie with my mom, my dad, my twin sister, and my brother, who is 18 months younger than I. While growing up, my needs were always met, yet I remember feeling terrified a lot of the time. My siblings were my built-in friends, and my parents let us do any activity we asked. I learned drums and guitar. I played basketball, baseball, and soccer. My siblings and I went to day camps and did activities through our church and schools. But I couldn't stick with any activity because of how difficult it was for me to be there. I needed one of my parents to be with me at all times. My dad coached the sports teams I was on when he could, but I still felt what I now know as anxiety. When it came time for me to be left somewhere without my parents, I had a debilitating level of anxiety. I didn't know how to communicate what I was feeling. I didn't even know what I was feeling. So I would communicate the only way I knew how. At home, I lived in the fight mode of fight or flight. I had what many would call temper tantrums. I would experience intense emotions, and my behaviors would seem like overreactions. I would cry, scream, swear, use insults, throw and break things, and get physical. But only my family members would witness these kinds of behaviors. So it was difficult for my parents to find help for me when the people we reached out to couldn't see what my parents could see. At school, my teachers would witness more of the flight mode of fight or flight. After losing the fight to stay with my parents for the day, I would only want to leave school. I constantly felt sick, and I would phone home a lot and ask to be picked up. Teachers, principals, and other staff would do their best to help me feel comfortable at school. They would sit with me one-on-one. I was allowed to take breaks in the office or library. I was drawn to these spaces that were safer than the classroom, so I would often overstay my welcome, and I'd get in trouble for not going to class. I didn't want to miss school or not do extracurricular activities. I just couldn't. When I was 14, my mom and dad decided to enroll me in an online school. I studied online from grade 9 until I graduated from that school. I struggled with social studies though, and in grade 12, I had to go back to the classroom so I could pass. I still had debilitating anxiety, and I often wouldn't make it to a full class, let alone a full week of classes. Mom and Dad always kept their eyes open for anything that might help me so I could live my life more easily. When I was 17, my parents bought a self-help program for me. It was based on cognitive behavioral therapy and was meant to help people who experience anxiety and depression. It changed my life. I went from thinking I would never leave my parents' side to feeling able and capable. I got a job at a funeral home in Grand Prairie after I graduated, and in 2013, my career in the funeral industry brought me to Calgary. I moved here that June, right before the floods. I worked as a funeral attendant and embalmer at McKinnis and Holloway. That's where I met my best friend, Jordan. Jordan and I would go for beers at different local pubs. We connected over a love for all kinds of music and deep conversation. We would drink tea together, and he tried to teach me how to knit. He was a religious studies major, and I admired his openness and loved hearing him talk about the things he learned. Working on funeral services was my favorite when Jordan was there. He was a calm and steady presence. He always had neat things to tell me about the different churches we were in. Jordan really opened my mind and the world to me. I was having the best year of my life. I found home in my dear friend Jordan, and nothing could knock me or rock me like it did in the past. I was secure. In April 2014, I went to Jordan's house for a party to celebrate the end of university classes. Jordan had 4 other roommates, and they lived in a house close to the U of C in Brentwood. So naturally, we had many gatherings there. It was always the same core group of friends. We'd play drinking games, and conversations would revolve around fun facts and deep subjects. It was always just good times. I usually would stay the night at these parties, but this time I decided to leave before the night was over. As I slept, the nation learned about the party I had been at. 5 university students had been stabbed and killed by another guest who experienced a psychotic break. I left the Brentwood 5 massacre 2 hours before the massacre. I started the next morning as normal. I had heard about a stabbing at a party, but it didn't even occur to me that it could be the party that I had been to. Later that day, I found out that my best friend, Jordan, was one of the 5 who were killed. I remember seeing my friends and acquaintances' pictures on the front pages of the paper. The pictures in the paper were always stories from far away, but this was happening here in my real life. I remember wondering how people were able to go about their days. Didn't they know what happened? I was able to access grief counseling right away through AHS, but because of the reach of this event, a lot of people needed help, and appointments were 6+ weeks apart. I needed a lot more help and support than that. I was suffering from trauma, and behaviors from my childhood returned. My loved ones, and myself for that matter, didn't know what to do with the intense outbursts, and no one could predict when I was going to have one. The police were called many, many times, and I would be taken to the hospital. Doctors would give me medication to calm down. They'd assess me and send me on my way. I wasn't a harm to myself at this point. I was just extremely distressed, and that doesn't warrant a hospital stay. I did get to the point where I was a harm to myself, and I was admitted to a mental health unit at Rocky View. I spent 2 weeks on the unit, and after that, I attended the day program at Rocky View. I had a psychiatrist follow me through the program, and she took me as a patient once my time at the day program concluded. She supported me while I looked for more appropriate help. While waiting for this help, I had 2 serious suicide attempts by overdosing on prescription medication and alcohol. I would self-harm, often cutting myself and punching walls just to try to break my hands. I got into Hull's program, Bridging the Gap, after only a few months. The wait list today is over a year. A qualifying factor to get into Bridging the Gap is being a young adult, aged 16 to 24 at the time of intake. I was 22, and in a sense I feel lucky that Jordan died when he did, so I could get into a program like Bridging the Gap. I'm 30 now, and I see people my age who are struggling and don't have access to programs like this because they are adults. At Bridging the Gap, I connected with my case manager once a week and attended their dialectical behavioral therapy group twice. I also was able to access a psychiatrist through Bridging the Gap. All of this helped me profoundly. This was the team I needed. I learned to manage my distress in healthy ways and to understand and work with my emotions. I learned how to communicate with the different people in my life. There was less chaos coming from within me. But I still struggled immensely with suicidal ideation and self-harm. Police came and got me from an overpass that I was thinking of jumping off of once, and I again was admitted to a mental health unit. I felt so stuck, and I was at a point where my supports didn't know what else to offer me. I felt like I had tried everything, and I thought there was nothing else that I or anyone could do. So I looked into medical assistance in dying or MAID. My family knew and understood. We talked a lot about it, and they would have supported me if MAID had been an option I could take. Looking back, I still feel it was a rational process. I was as better as I was going to get with the support I had. In 2020, I got a phone call from my case manager. With the support of Hull's Trauma-Informed Services Department, Bridging the Gap was able to bring in therapists. I've been seeing my therapist since, and in the last 2 years is where I've seen the most progress in myself. Many of the skills I learned through Bridging the Gap have become natural. My therapist and I have been able to focus deeper, and I'm experiencing breakthroughs. After not being able to live a lot of parts of my life for all these years, I started working with my best friend at her tea factory. Then I received another call from my case manager. She told me about Hull's Voices of Lived Experience, and she felt I was in a place where I could begin using my journey to give back. I agreed that it was a great opportunity, and I joined the council in 2021. Through Hull's Voices, I have gotten to share and use my experience to give back. This has played a big role in my healing. I've gone from feeling like I'm not part of a story that is such a huge part of me, to talking about where I have come from and reclaiming my place in my story. After accessing services through Hull over the last 7 years, I now get to pay forward what they have given me and use my story to teach others. I'm so grateful to Hull for this opportunity to heal and the opportunity to reciprocate. And that's how I ended up here tonight. I wanted to share my story with you because I wouldn't be where I am today without Hull Services. I wouldn't be here at all. My hopes are for Hull Services to be able to reach as many people as possible, and for everyone who accesses services through Hull to benefit as greatly as I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emilee. That takes a lot of courage to come forward and tell the story, and we're just so honored that you were with us tonight, and we wish you all the very best in your continuing journey. Very special thank you to our sponsors, to our donors, and all of the guests for making this a wonderful celebration this evening. We are truly, truly grateful for your support and for your friendship. And now please continue to enjoy the wonderful music and the food and the networking, and perhaps we'll have a chance to say hello as well. So thank you.